So I had another breakthrough which builds on the previous breakthrough that I talked about not so long ago, where I talk about how non-attachment can become an attachment. So it will help you to have watched that one before you watch this one. But I'll give a brief summary here. The realization I came to is that it's perfectly valid on the spiritual path that we seek to overcome our attachments. And that this is the key to passing the initiation where we can ascend from this world. We can let go of this world permanently because there's nothing here we feel we have to change or we have to do. So this is a valid enough path, but what I had come to see in my mind was that in order to avoid reacting to the world, to the demons of Mara, as they were tempting the Buddha, was to have no emotions and no thoughts. And I came to realize that over past lifetimes I had been embodied in the East, and I've been part of these Eastern mystical traditions where they often seek to control the mind, to discipline the mind. And I realized that in my mind I had come to think that that meant I should be able to stop all mental activity and control the mind. But in reality, our four lower bodies are designed to interact with the world. So the emotions are always going to fluctuate, they're always going to oscillate in reaction to the world. And the thoughts, they're always going to be thoughts about relating to the world. And so it's futile to try to stop this, because it's like trying to stop your heartbeat or stop your breathing. You may be able to stop your breathing for a while, but then you die. And so what's the point? And so what I realized is that it's okay to have feelings. We just make sure that they arise, and once they calm down, like the water is calm, we don't create any ongoing structure by having thoughts about the feelings like we shouldn't have feelings. Oh, I should have been able to control my feelings. Why couldn't I control my feelings? That means I'm not really a spiritual person, and so forth and so on. We can build onto this. So based on this, we were out taking a walk by the water, and suddenly it hit me. The irony that many of these Eastern traditions that want to control the mind, they're actually from the Buddhist tradition. So they're based on the teachings of the Buddha. But what hit me was that they are seeking to control the mind. And in order to control the mind, in order to control anything really, you have to stop its flow. You have to sort of freeze it in a certain state. Because otherwise, how can you control it? As long as it might develop, as it's still moving, it might move in unpredictable ways. So really, control implies stopping, attempting to stop something. You attempt to stop your thoughts, stop your feelings. And what hit me was that this is in complete contradiction to one of the Buddha's central doctrines, which I actually talked about in a video, and it's the interdependent originations. So what I suddenly saw was that the teaching of interdependent originations is basically everything is interconnected, and everything is, it's not just that it's affected by, but everything interacts with everything else. And the example that's often used is that you can have a seed, but the seed can't grow by itself and become a tree. It's dependent on soil, moisture, temperature, all of these outer conditions. And if the outer conditions aren't there, the seed can't sprout. So in reality, the seed is interacting with the environment, and it's part of the environment, and it's all of these different aspects of the environment that come together to produce the tree. And so the central idea of Buddhism, or this doctrine of interdependent originations, is that nothing is separate. There is nothing that is separate. Now, this has some ramifications that have sometimes misinterpreted, because, for example, some people have interpreted this to mean there is no self. But that's not really what the Buddha said. The Buddha said, and I've talked about this before, that in Hinduism, one of the central doctrines there is that there is an unchanging permanent self called the Atma. And the Buddha said he had never discovered such a self in his own mind. Doesn't mean there is no self, but there is no permanent, unchanging self. Because the self is always changing by interacting with its environment that it is part of. So it's not that you can say, here's this little separate self that's completely isolated from the world. That is an illusion. And that's what made me realize, hey, this is a very common image in Eastern spirituality. That in order to be really spiritual and focus on your spiritual growth, you have to withdraw from the world. So when I was in Transcending meditation, it was said that the Maharishi who started the movement, he had spent 12 years meditating in a cave in the Himalayas. So the illusion there is that by physically withdrawing into a cave in the Himalayas where there's this high vibration and this and that, you can isolate yourself from the world and just focus on God. This is also projected in Yogananda's book, Autobiography of a Yogi, where his dream as a young man was to go to the Himalayas and sit there and meditate on God until he had God realization. But think about this idea, that you can withdraw from the world and isolate yourself from the world. Think about it in the context of the interdependent originations. You can never separate yourself from the world. Maybe physically, but certainly not emotionally, mentally, and at the identity level. You will always be interacting with the world. And so, what I saw was this. There's been created this image in spiritual traditions that you should be able to control the mind. Stop your feelings, stop your thoughts. But the interdependent originations means, first of all, this is impossible, can't happen, but it's not constructive. That's not the point of spirituality. Because your four-lower bodies are designed to interact with the world. They are part of the world. They are part of the interdependent originations, the connectedness of everything. And the purpose of this is, of course, as I explained in my video about how the world was created, is our growth in awareness, our growth in self-awareness. We start out with a point-like sense of self. By interacting with the world, we gradually expand our sense of self, transcending our sense of self, reaching higher and higher levels of awareness. So, the whole point of our existence is this growth. And this happens only by interacting with the world, not by isolating ourselves from the world. So the interdependent originations, if you think about it, you can think about it as a river that's constantly moving. So you may have a river, large river, that's thousands of kilometers long. And you can go to different places and look at, in the beginning it's very narrow, it's very fast, it's falling quickly, then it becomes a little more mellow, and in the end it takes these wide turns before it runs into the ocean. So you can say that this is a very different river. But you could also step back and look at it and say, but this river is actually one mass of water that's flowing as a unit. 5,000 kilometers long river, but it's one body of water that's flowing together. Twisting, turning, eddies, whirlpools, flowing around rocks, but it's one mass of water that's flowing as a unit, interconnected whole. And so the thing is, Everything in the interconnected whole interacts with everything. In fact, you could say there is no thing. The deeper understanding is there is no separate thing. Our senses, our minds have become geared towards seeing everything as separate. That's what I'm talked about. We step into the illusion of separation. If we see ourselves as separate beings, we see the world as made up of separate things. And therefore we think we can gain control over some of these separate things, including maybe our own mind. But in reality, with the interdependent originations, it's not a matter of getting control. It's a matter of directing the flow. Because as I said, control, in order to really control something, you have to stop the movement, stop the flow. And this is what the separate self is geared towards doing. It wants to freeze its environment so it can control it. Maybe not stop all movement, but certainly limit the movement within very strict boundaries. But when you grasp the interdependent originations and realize you are not a separate self, you realize that your goal is not to have control, not to stop movement. Your goal is to flow with the whole, because this helps you grow, raise your awareness, not as a separate being, but as a connected being. So instead of stopping the flow or directing it into a specific channel, you are simply flowing with it. And when something happens, if there's a rock in front of you, you simply say, how can I flow around it? Because my goal is to keep flowing. How can I flow around it? Whatever situations happen in your life, it's not, let's look at it this way. When you're in a separate self, you are thinking, certain things should happen, certain things shouldn't happen. Now something happens to you that shouldn't have happened. Now you're thinking, oh, because this terrible thing happened, now I can't get to where I want to go in life. You could literally feel you've failed, your life has taken a wrong turn, you can never recover from it. But when you are connected, when you're flowing, you're saying, oh, this thing happened, let's see. This just means I have to find a different way to get to the goal than what I may have thought before. But you can even come to a point where you don't have any view of what should or shouldn't happen. You don't have any view of how to get to the goal, because your goal is just to flow and continue to transcend. And everything that happens is an opportunity to transcend, to flow on. And so I guess there are many ramifications of this. But because what I really saw was this need to flow. The Ascended Masters talk about the river of life, that everything is the river of life, because everything in the world is connected and everything is just flowing up as one stream. And we are on an unnatural planet called Earth. That's why we can maintain the illusion that we are separate beings and that things are not flowing, that we are in this isolated unit floating around in empty space. But everything is being pulled by everything else. So it really is not a matter of trying to reach some ultimate state here in the material world, whether it's spiritual or material. However we define this ultimate state, even if we define it as enlightenment or awakening or some ultimate state of consciousness, that's not the goal. The goal is to flow on, to transcend, and eventually transcend this material world, this unascended sphere. And it basically means that any kind of spirituality that's aimed at control, it's not the highest form of spirituality. The highest form of, well, it's meaningless to talk about the highest form, but the constructive way to approach spirituality is the flow. Seeing it as a means to engage in the flow and get a sense of what direction you want to flow in and how to get there, and how to not let anything stop you. Whatever comes up, you flow around it. And you use it even to raise your awareness, to transcend your sense of self. Because you could say let's say you are in a boat. You are flowing down a river. And now you come to an obstacle. And in order to continue to flow down the river, you may have to give up the boat. Let's say there are some big rocks and the boat can't pass through them. But you can. So, if you want to keep flowing, you leave the boat behind. You leave your sense of self, your sense of who you are, your separate subconscious selves behind, so you can continue to flow. It's like there's a grid that is holding back some of these subconscious selves you have. And the only way that you can get through the grid is to give them up so you can continue to flow. And that's really the only meaning of obstacles. It's an opportunity to give up something in our own psychology and our four lower bodies that prevents us from flowing freely. Because, as I've said, the core of our being is the conscious you. Pure awareness, it's not these outer selves. So the conscious you can really flow through or around any obstacle. The subconscious selves can't. And of course the subconscious selves believe they are separate selves. They can't see the interdependent originations. They can't see that everything is a flow. And they can't see that the purpose is to continue flowing. And I think there's probably a lot of conclusions you could draw from it, but so far this is what's come to me. And it's not that I haven't grasped this before, because I can look at my life and I can see that after I really started working on my psychology, I've actually become gradually better and better at flowing with life. And I have let go of this idea that certain things should happen, certain things shouldn't happen. And I've let go of these images of who I am and what I should be or shouldn't be as a spiritual person. Because I've gradually realized that really the goal of being a spiritual person is to become transparent to the appearances in the world. So let's look at it this way. The separate mind, the separate self, is looking at everything. There is separate events, separate things that can happen. So it looks at, when I was new to spirituality, I was very much approaching the spiritual path through the separate selves. So I was thinking, here I am as a separate being. My goal is to win my ascension. And in the beginning, I thought it was a matter of acquiring certain knowledge, certain abilities, raising my consciousness, passing initiations, and this and that. But later I came to understand that the ascension is actually the ultimate letting go of any sense of self relating to earth. And it's not, as I've explained, it's not that there's anything wrong with some of these cells we have. Some of them are dualistic cells based on separation, they are illusions. But in order to even take embodiment, we have to create certain cells in order to integrate with the physical body, with the four lower bodies. But the thing is, these selves are relating to the physical world on earth. And in order to ascend from earth, we can't have anything that pulls us back here. That's what is the whole idea of the Buddha sitting under the Bo tree being tempted by the demons of Mara. There can't be anything in us that the earth can pull on. We haven't finished, we haven't done, we haven't experienced this or that. And so, in a sense, you could say, the ascension is a process where we immerse ourselves in the flow, the river of life, the upward movement, the Holy Spirit created by all beings who are ascending. And you could say that in order to be free of earth, we have to pass through this filter. And any sense of self that was created in relation to earth can't pass through it. So the spiritual path is the path of becoming transparent to not just the earth, but the idea that they are separate things. It's like the world presents us with this. There's a mountain, there's a forest, there's the ocean, there's a certain situation you are being attacked. All of these, 8 billion separate people living on the planet. All of these illusions that are projecting at us that this is something separate. This is something separate from the whole, separate from you. And basically what we have to overcome is this illusion that there is a separate thing that can keep us out of the flow. That's as I see it now, the deepest meaning of the interdependent originations. The world presents us with the illusion that there are all these separate things, and that we are a separate self that can be affected by these separate things in such a way that it stops us from flowing with the whole. Stops us from connecting to the whole, and instead makes us focus on these separate things. Focusing as a separate self, affected by separate things. And basically what we have to overcome is the illusion that we are a separate self that can be affected by separate things and conditions. Instead, we realize we are a connected self. We are part of the whole. Yes, we are affected by everything that happens in the whole. We are affected by what happens on earth. We are interacting with the earth. We have feelings and thoughts and this and that. And we take actions, but they are not stopping us from flowing with the whole, with the river of life. And so basically what I saw was that the kind of spiritual traditions that are aimed at this, here's the solitary climber on a mountain who is isolating himself from the world and seeking to discipline his mind and gain control over his mind. That kind of spirituality actually reinforces the illusion of separation, the illusion that we are a separate self. And it doesn't matter how long you practice it, it's still reinforcing that illusion. And I saw that the shift we need to make is this, gradually overcoming this illusion that we are a separate self that are affected by separate things and conditions, so that we can immerse ourselves in the flow and realize that whatever happens in this material world here on earth, it can't stop the flow. It's just another way to leave behind some separate self, some illusion that we're separate. And therefore everything really is an opportunity to transcend ourselves. And therefore we don't need to isolate ourselves from the world. We don't need to seek to control the world. We just look at every situation as part of the flow. How can I flow on? What do I need to leave behind in order to pass through this grid and flow on? So I don't have an attachment, I don't have a reaction to the situation. I'm just interacting with the situation, flowing, flowing, flowing.